October 9, 1967. A rural schoolhouse in La Higuera, Bolivia. An intoxicated soldier enters. He fires 9 rounds. Che Guevara dies. 5 children become orphans. The eldest was 11 years old, the youngest just 2. None realized they had just lost their father forever. Cuba transformed the deceased Che into a worldwide revolutionary icon. But his children's lives took an unexpected path. Restricted public appearances, carefully measured statements, one daughter marginalized from the official narrative. This is the complex story of Che Guevara's children. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and motivate us to bring you more in-depth historical content. Your support is essential for continuing to explore these intricate stories from the 20th century. When Che perished, he left behind 5 children from 2 marriages. Hilda Beatriz was 11 years old, Aleida was 7, Camilo was 5, Celia was 4, Ernesto was 2. Everyone except Hilda remained in Cuba, but before dying, Che had left something for them. Before departing permanently, Che wrote a final letter to his 5 children, a letter meant to be read after his death. In July 1966, he traveled secretly to Cuba for the last time to meet with Fidel Castro and see his wife Aleida march. In that letter, Che explained why he chose revolution, why he considered his historical duty to be paramount, and he concluded with an instruction that revealed his hope for them. Above all, always be capable of feeling any injustice against anyone, anywhere in the world. This is the most beautiful quality of a revolutionary, Che wrote. These were words from a father who knew he probably wouldn't return. Words his children would read years later. Words that would mark their lives in complex ways. The Cuban government faced a strategic decision after 1967. The dead Che became a global symbol. His image was worth more as myth than as complex human memory, and his children represented a particular narrative challenge for that myth. Because the children could speak of Che the father, of the man who abandoned them to go to Bolivia, of the absent father, of the broken family, that humanity complicated the image of the perfect revolutionary. And in Cuba, narrative control is a fundamental part of the political system. The 5 children were Hilda, Aleida, Camilo, Celia, and Ernesto. Each faced the weight of the Guevara surname differently. Some became spokespeople for the legacy. Others chose silence. One was systematically marginalized. Their stories reveal unexpected complexities. Aleida Guevara March was born in 1960, daughter from Che's second marriage to Aleida March. She grew up without a father, but with his name on monuments throughout Cuba. She studied medicine like him. She became the most visible public defender of the revolutionary legacy. Aleida travels the world giving lectures about her father. She has written books. She appears in documentaries. She is the official face of the Guevara family. But observers notice something interesting. Her public statements maintain a consistent line with the Cuban official narrative. In 2003, during an international interview, Aleida attempted to humanize her father. She spoke of his doubts, his human side. According to journalist reports, that humanization generated discomfort in official circles. Subsequent interviews followed more careful patterns. Journalists who have interviewed Aleida report a similar experience. Encounters frequently have the presence of officials or coordinators. Sensitive questions must be sent in advance. Significant deviations from the agreed topic result in polite termination of the interview. Aleida has never publicly stated in official interviews whether she felt anger toward her father for abandoning the family, whether she ever wished he had chosen to stay, whether pride coexists with pain. She only expresses admiration. Emotional complexity remains in the private sphere. This limitation is not necessarily imposed by force. In Cuba, where the state controls media and employment, there is tacit understanding of boundaries. Aleida probably understands that expressing public pain over paternal abandonment would be interpreted as criticism of the national revolutionary hero. Camilo Guevara March was born in 1962, the second son from the marriage to Aleida March. He was known for his affable and discreet character. He studied labor law. He dedicated his life to preserving his father's legacy in a serious and committed manner. Camilo became director of the Che Guevara Study Center in Havana, an institution dedicated to promoting his father's work and thought. Unlike his sister Aleida, Camilo maintained a lower profile. He was less publicly known in Cuba and abroad. Trained in law, Camilo worked as a promoter of his father's ideas. He was critical of excessive commercialization of Che's image. In 2010, he declared that the excessive commercialization of my father's image contributes to the disappearance of his history. Camilo occasionally traveled as an itinerant ambassador of his paternal legacy. He visited Brazil in 1997 for the 30th anniversary commemoration of Che's death. His approach was more academic and serious than media-focused. He preferred preserving ideology over spectacle. In August 2022, Camilo traveled to Caracas, Venezuela, to visit a friend. He was 60 years old. On August 30th, he suffered a pulmonary thromboembolism that caused a heart attack. He died in the Venezuelan capital, far from his native Cuba. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel confirmed the death. With profound sorrow, we bid farewell to Camilo, son of Che and promoter of his ideas, as director of the Che Center, which preserves part of his father's extraordinary legacy. It was an unexpected blow to the family. Camilo Guevara March died doing what he always did, keeping his father's memory alive in a dignified and serious manner. He dedicated 6 decades to that purpose. He lived and died as custodian of the revolutionary legacy. His death in 2022 closed an important chapter. Celia Guevara March was born in 1963, the third daughter from the second marriage. She made a notable decision. She chose to maintain an extremely low profile. While Aleida gave international conferences, Celia systematically distanced herself from the public stage. Celia studied veterinary medicine. She works in the agricultural sector far from Havana. She has rejected the vast majority of interview requests over decades. She avoids official events. She doesn't travel as a cultural ambassador. Her absence from the media circus is consistent and deliberate. For some analysts, her silence is a form of peaceful resistance. Celia appears to have understood that the only way to maintain relative privacy was not to participate in the public narrative. Her absence is her response, her invisibility, her personal space within the system. People who know Celia mention that she has complex feelings about her father, probably admiration mixed with pain over abandonment. But she keeps those feelings in a completely private sphere. She doesn't feed the propaganda machine. She doesn't allow her words to be politicized. In 2017, during the 50th anniversary of Che's death, journalists searched intensely for Celia for interviews. She was very difficult to locate. She works on rural projects. She declined all participation in massive media coverage. She deliberately maintained her distance. Officials have occasionally attempted to convince her to participate in important ceremonies, to appear briefly, to say a few words. Celia generally politely refuses, and since forcing her would be counterproductive to the official image, they generally respect her decision of absence. Celia Guevara is possibly Che's daughter who lives with the greatest relative privacy. She isn't completely free because in Cuba no one enjoys Western freedom. But she is more distant from public scrutiny than her siblings. Her invisibility strategy worked surprisingly well. Ernesto Guevara March was born in 1965, the fourth child. He bears the same name as his father. He studied economics, and there his professional dilemma began. He studied the economic theories his father implemented and reached academically uncomfortable conclusions. Che was Minister of Industry in Cuba from 1961 to 1965. He implemented policies based on the new socialist man. He abolished material incentives. He promoted voluntary labor. Official history presents these policies as successful innovations. Ernesto, the son, as a professional economist, knows the documented objective results. Che's economic policies faced significant challenges. Production had serious problems. Several factories closed. Voluntary labor showed practical limitations. Cuba depended massively on Soviet subsidies. In 2007, Ernesto participated in an economic seminar in Havana. Foreign academics asked about his father's economic theories. Ernesto responded with balance. He acknowledged conceptual innovation, but also admitted that practical implementation had significant difficulties. According to participant reports, that technical criticism generated discomfort. It's mentioned that officials subsequently reminded him that his role includes defending Che's legacy. Ernesto understood the implicit message. There are clear limits for public critical analysis, even when it's academically honest. Ernesto made the decision to focus on technical economic work without sensitive political implications. He continues working as an economist, but carefully avoids public debates about the effectiveness of Che's policies. He learned to navigate between academic truth and familial political expectations. The historical irony is notable. Che himself wrote extensively about the importance of revolutionary debate and constant self-criticism. He explicitly valued questioning dogmas. But the system that turned him into an untouchable icon eliminates precisely that dialectical complexity he valued. Ernesto Guevara March lives in Cuba. He works in state economic institutions. He gives occasional interviews where he maintains a consistent official line. Academics who know him personally mention that in informal private conversations, Ernesto shows significantly more nuanced and critical thinking. Hilda Beatriz Guevara Gadea was born in 1956 in Mexico, Che's first daughter from his first marriage to Hilda Gadea, a Peruvian revolutionary. When her parents divorced in 1959, Hilda was barely 3 years old. Che married Aleida March that same year. He had 4 more children with her. Hilda remained primarily with her mother. Che maintained sporadic contact through letters. The relationship was distant. For official Cuba, Hilda represented a complicated narrative of the perfect hero. Hilda represented something uncomfortable for the myth, that Che divorced to marry another younger woman, that he abandoned a wife and small daughter, that his personal life included painful decisions for others. That imperfect humanity complicated the idealized revolutionary image. After Che's death, Hilda attempted to connect with her half-siblings in Cuba. She visited Havana in the 70s. She was received, but always with certain institutional distance. The regime didn't know exactly what to do with her narratively. Including her complicated things, excluding her seemed cruel. Hilda Guevara Gadea died of cancer in 1995 in Cuba. She was 39 years old, exactly the same age as her father when he died. There were no state ceremonies, no important official speeches. Her death was barely mentioned in Cuban media. While the 4 children from the second marriage appeared regularly in documentaries and official interviews, Hilda was systematically omitted from many state narratives. In state-produced documentaries about Che, they frequently don't even mention her, as if she were an uncomfortable footnote. Hilda's story is particularly sad due to double marginalization. First by her father, who chose to divorce and follow his revolutionary path with a new family. Then by the system that turned her father into a perfect myth with no space for first wives and daughters. For decades, the Cuban government has maintained control over the official narrative of Che Guevara. This is a recognized fact. Part of that control involves coordinating public appearances of his children. Authorized biographies undergo review. Interviews are supervised or coordinated. International journalists and academics confirm that there exists an official structure dedicated to protecting Che's image. The Che Guevara Study Center coordinates family appearances. They ensure public statements maintain coherence with official history. This is not speculation, but documented practice. Foreign journalists who have interviewed Che's children report consistent experiences. Encounters frequently have the presence of officials or coordinators. Sensitive questions must be sent in advance. Significant deviations from the agreed topic result in polite termination of the interview. In 2017, a European production company proposed a documentary about the personal lives of Che's children beyond politics. They wanted to explore profound human experiences. The Cuban government didn't approve permits according to the original concept. The project couldn't be realized as initially conceived. The regime perfectly understands that controlling historical narrative is a fundamental political tool. The dead Che can be molded to serve current political objectives. His living children represent narrative risk because they could reveal human complexities that complicate the simplified heroic image. The system doesn't require the children to actively lie, simply that they emphasize certain aspects while minimizing others, that they speak of the revolutionary more than the absent father, that they express public pride more than private pain, and to a large extent, that's exactly what they do. The farewell letters Che wrote before departing permanently were delivered to the children years after his death, not immediately. The government considered it appropriate to wait until they were older. They decided the moment of delivery of the final paternal words. Aleida was approximately 16 years old when she read the farewell letter, almost 10 years after Che's death. An entire decade without those final words. The state determined when it was the appropriate moment for the children to know that last message from their father. Published versions of those letters also went through a known editorial process. Scholars point out that some editions emphasize revolutionary elements while contextualizing or minimizing personal emotional aspects. Particularly human phrases are contextualized to serve the broader revolutionary narrative. In the letter to Hildita, Che wrote, "Remember once in a while this little daddy from the 20th century. It's a revealing and sad phrase. It shows he knew he might be forgotten by her, that his revolutionary choice meant sacrificing a deep, personal relationship. But he ended with a beautiful and revealing instruction. Above all, always be capable of feeling deeply any injustice committed against anyone, anywhere in the world. This is the most beautiful quality of a revolutionary." It was his hope for them. Official propaganda reinterprets those letters primarily as heroic texts about necessary revolutionary sacrifice. The personal pain they contain is secondary to the political message. A father's letters of absence are presented as visionary declarations of a leader committed to history. Che's children haven't been able to publicly express all the emotional complexity of those letters, whether the words hurt them, whether they felt anger in addition to pride, whether the pain of abandonment coexists with admiration. That complexity remains private because admitting it publicly would be politically uncomfortable. Che Guevara's image is an extraordinary global commercial phenomenon. His iconic face is on t-shirts, posters, infinite products. It generates millions in annual income from image rights. The Cuban government controls an important part through the Che Guevara Studies Center. The children work at that center. They manage aspects of their father's commercial legacy. They participate in decisions about authorized use of the image. They receive state salaries for managing the Che Guevara brand. It's a historical paradox. The most famous anti-capitalist became a successful commercial product. The children don't completely control that business. The Cuban state makes final decisions about important commercial aspects. The children are administrators within a state structure, not independent owners. Even the commerce of paternal image operates within a controlled institutional framework. In 2008, Aleida participated in a legal case against a company using Che's image without proper authorization. The case involved protecting image rights. Resulting income went to the studies center. Commercial management operates within the Cuban state system. The interesting philosophical question is what Che would think about this. His image sold commercially in capitalist stores. His face on mass consumer products. His children managing a brand within a system that commercializes his anti-capitalist ideology as profitable global merchandise. Camilo was particularly critical of this phenomenon. In 2010, he publicly declared that excessive commercialization of his father's image contributed to the disappearance of his true history and ideology. He was one of the few family voices questioning this aspect. The third generation is making different decisions from their parents. Canek Sanchez Guevara, Che's grandson and Hilda's son, left Cuba in the 90s. He established himself in Mexico. He wrote critical articles about the Cuban system until his premature death in 2015. Canek grew up partially outside the direct control of the Cuban apparatus. Perhaps that's why he dared to publicly express what his uncles couldn't. He wrote that Che had prioritized ideology over family, that abandoning children for revolution is an ethically questionable decision. Official Cuban media criticized Canek. They suggested he was personally resentful, that he didn't comprehend his grandfather's revolutionary historical greatness. Canek responded, "My grandfather chose to die for strangers before living for his children. That decision is morally debatable." It was provocative and honest. Other grandchildren have emigrated more discreetly. They live in various countries. They generally don't give public interviews. They don't speak openly about family. But their silent emigration says something important. They chose not to live under the weight of the Guevara surname in a place where that surname comes with political expectations. The third generation has an important historical advantage: temporal and geographical distance. They didn't grow up directly under regime surveillance like the second generation. They weren't molded from early childhood to be official spokespeople. That distance allows them to see Ernesto Guevara as a complex man. The regime is losing control over Che's narrative generation by generation, inevitably. They could closely supervise the children directly, but the grandchildren are speaking more freely from exile. And in coming decades, the complete historical truth will be impossible to contain. For decades, Che's children have paid a significant price for their famous surname. They've lost substantial privacy, relative autonomy, complete freedom of public expression. They've lived as public figures representing a narrative written by the state system. They've been symbols more than private individuals. Their career choices were clearly influenced by political and familial expectations. Aleida studied medicine like her father. Camilo studied law and directed the studies center. Others followed politically acceptable paths. Being Che's child means constantly serving a certain legacy. Their personal relationships face scrutiny. Family decisions have potential public implications. Raising their own children means those children also carry the surname with everything it implies historically. The weight is transmitted generationally. Expectation is inherited as the name is inherited. And perhaps the most humanly difficult thing, they haven't been able to freely express the full range of emotions about their father publicly, because feeling anger over abandonment is natural. Feeling pain when a father chooses to die far away is human, but that anger has been difficult for them to express publicly. The system has made it difficult for them to have a completely complex relationship with their father in the public sphere. To love him and question him simultaneously. To honor him and feel pain over absence. To admire him and be angry. That complexity is normal in family relationships, but it's been limited by the need to preserve the political myth. Che's children are not unique in facing this. In Cuba, families of prominent revolutionary figures face similar expectations of public loyalty, but the Guevaras are an extreme case, because Che is the maximum international symbol, and protecting that symbol requires narrative consistency. There are historical questions that remain difficult to explore publicly in Cuba about Che. Questions his children probably know the answers to, but can't freely reveal without consequences. First, what was the true nature of the relationship between Che and Fidel in the final years? Declassified historical documents suggest Fidel and Che had significant disagreements about Cuba's economic direction in the 60s. Che criticized the approach to the Soviet Union. Fidel desperately needed Soviet support. Some historians speculate about deep political tensions between them. Second complex historical question. Why was Cuban support for Che's guerrilla in Bolivia so limited? The guerrilla was isolated, with few resources, starving. They requested urgent help. Cuba sent words of encouragement, but material support was minimal. Was it strategic? Third question. What exactly do the completely unedited versions of Che's diaries contain? Historians point out that official editions went through an editorial process. What sections were modified exactly? The children have access to original documents but don't reveal specific differences. Fourth question. Does Aleida March collaborate with the official narrative out of genuine revolutionary conviction or systemic pressure? She controls access to important documents. She approves official biographies. She is guardian of the legacy. Do her decisions reflect her true beliefs, or is she protecting her children within the system? These questions probably won't be answered completely while Cuba maintains its current political system, because answering them completely and honestly could significantly alter the established narrative. And that narrative has immense economic, political, and ideological value for the Cuban state. Comparatively, Fidel Castro's children have had varied and different experiences. Alina Fernandez escaped dramatically to the United States in 1993. She wrote highly critical books about her father. She lives in exile. Che's children haven't taken that path so far. Fidel Castro Diaz-Balart, Fidel's eldest scientific son, died by suicide in 2018. He had suffered clinical depression for years. Some people wonder whether the constant pressure of being Fidel's son, the political expectations, contributed to his profound suffering. Fidel's children have something different from Che's children. Their father lived to a very advanced age. They could interact with him directly for decades. Che's children only have fragmented memories from early childhood. A historical ghost. A myth. A father lost young. Children of other Latin American revolutionaries have followed very diverse paths. Some continue the political legacy, others reject it completely. Many can choose freely. Che's children in Cuba have more limited options because the state controls official interpretation of the revolutionary past. Cuba faces inevitable and irreversible generational change. Fidel died in 2016. Raúl is completely retired. The generation that knew Che personally is biologically disappearing, and with them, direct emotional control over the narrative. New generations have less personal connection. Contemporary young Cubans wear T-shirts with Che's iconic face, but many don't know specific details of his real life. He's a cultural symbol, frequently depoliticized for them. Final historical irony: the man who wanted to create the new socialist man became a fashion logo. Che's children are inevitably aging. Aleida is 65 years old. Ernesto is 60. Celia is 62. Camilo died in 2022. In the next 2 decades, they will have also died. And with them, the last direct blood connection to Ernesto Guevara. Some historians believe the Che cult will evolve significantly after that generation. That without direct family witnesses, without supervised family, historical interpretation will become more academic and less emotional. That future Cubans will see Che as an analyzable, complex historical figure. Other analysts believe the regime will find new ways to maintain controlled narrative. That digital technology allows more sophisticated preservation and control of historical memory. That the Che myth will be constantly adapted for new generations. That control will evolve, but won't disappear completely. What's probable is that Che's children will be the last generation under such direct and intense supervision. Their grandchildren are escaping that weight through emigration. Their great-grandchildren will grow up completely free of direct expectations. In 50 years, history will finally be just analyzable history. This is the complex, little-explored story. 5 children turned into carefully supervised public figures, with measured public voices. One was marginalized from official history. One dedicated his life to the legacy until his death in 2022. The rest live within the system. Che Guevara chose revolution over his children. That's a documented historical decision. The Cuban regime chose myth over complete humanity. And the children paid the price of both choices. They lived decades without being able to express the full emotional truth about their father publicly. If this story impacted you, leave your like, comment what you thought, and subscribe to the channel. Share this video so more people know this complex 20th century story. Follow us for more profound and nuanced historical accounts. Thank you for listening until the end.